Hello and welcome everyone to this episode of the Afghanistan podcast. Joining us today, we have a British Iraqi author and a scholar, Louay Fatoohi. Louay specializes in fields such as comparative religion, cosmology, Islamic spirituality. Many of you may already be familiar with Louay from his appearances on the Blogging Theology podcast. But if you haven't seen that already, I would highly recommend it. I'll actually leave some links in the show notes. So do check that out maybe after this episode. So thank you, Louay. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very much for the invitation. Just a slight thing. It's Louay, so slightly different.
Louay.
Louay.
Louay, I'm so sorry.
No, that's all right.
Ask you actually, I've never heard this name.
It's actually it's an Arabic name. The eighth grandfather of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was called Louay, so it's an old Arabic name.
I did not know that, and actually that was going to be one of my first questions. What does the name mean? So thank you for correcting me. Louay, is it?
Louay, yes.
Louay, beautiful name. So Louay, please, could you tell us a little bit about your background?
Yes. So I'm originally from Iraq, as you said. I studied in Iraq. I come from originally Christian family, and then I studied physics in Iraq. So I did a university degree in physics in Baghdad University, 1984, and I became Muslim. It was a process. There wasn't really a particular point when I was in my early 20s, so early in the 80s. My two brothers afterwards also both became Muslims. My wife and I came to the UK, migrated to the UK in 1992. I did some research at the beginning at Durham University. My wife was doing sabbatical there. She was a professor of physics back in Iraq, and she did sabbatical at Durham. In the meantime, I did some research in historical astronomy while doing pursuing other interests, in particular Sufism at the time. And then I did a PhD in historical astronomy, applied historical astronomy at Durham University in 1998. And so that's really in a nutshell where we live currently in Birmingham, in the UK.
Thank you so much for that. It's very interesting. Also, knowing that you're born in Iraq, you converted to Islam while you were in Iraq. For me, that's quite interesting because is it quite a common kind of a feature? Is there lots of conversions? Is it quite common in Iraq? Because I'm just guessing that when you're living in a kind of a Muslim community and you're not a Muslim yourself, feelings or beliefs can be quite entrenched. So how did you gain that interest in studying Islam?
Yeah, it's a good point, actually. Religious beliefs in Eastern societies, I would think, probably other societies, well, not in the West, it's part of your social identity.
Yes.
So you're a Christian, you're a Muslim, you're a Jew. It doesn't mean only in terms of religious and belonging.
Yeah.
It also defines you in society as a whole. And because of that, changing your religion, moving from one religion to another, is really huge, radical, substantial change to your life. And as is the case, usually you're confronted with a lot of hostility, rejection by the nearest and closest to you. And you understand that because even though for you it looks like a personal decision, it actually has a lot of impact on the people surrounding you. People would look at them, their own community, as if they'd done something wrong or something bad happened to them.
Yeah.
So it's not only about you, it's about the other people. And that's the kind of the story of reversion in Iraq. So it wasn't easy. But yes, you're absolutely right. It's not easy at all for you, for the person who embraces in your religion, or the people that he or she are connected with.
Exactly. I can see how that would happen because coming from Pakistan, I can see a lot of these identities are very kind of entrenched, and there could be a feeling in family, society that you've kind of let us down, so yeah.
There's a sense of shame, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. And it's interesting to see that then your brothers followed your path as well. So I can imagine you must have had a difficult journey, but it must be much benefit came from it, not just for you yourself, but your family members as well.
Well, I hope so. But yes, these changes can be difficult, like I say, to everybody concerned. But you always, in life, you come across all kinds. So let's just not make this bigger than what it is. Let's be serious about it. The reality is, keep your religion, change your religion, whatever. You're going to hit all kinds of things in life. Life isn't going to be nice to you all the time.
Yeah.
So it's just part of the struggle of life, really.
How did you become interested in Islam and also in Sufism? Did Islam bring you to Sufism, or did Sufism bring you to...
Yes, it was Islam to Sufism. And I mean, if I go back a little bit, and like I said, I came from a Christian family. It wasn't really a practicing Christian family. My father was a Catholic. My mother was an Orthodox Christian. May Allah show mercy to both of them. They're both dead now. We were not practicing Christians, but I was at a Catholic school in my primary school. As was my younger brother. And that obviously meant that you're getting that Catholic Christian religious education all the time. So stories about Jesus, etc., were very close to my heart. And when I was, I think around, I took my first, what they call it in Christianity, the first communion. When at the end of my primary school, when I was about 12 years old, I remember feeling like this was the happiest day of my life. And part of that process is that you confess, you did a confession as a Catholic. And I remember when I was young, sitting there taking it so seriously that I had actually started a whole record of all my sins at that age. Because I was going to tell the priest about all of them. That's what I thought was going to happen. And I can't remember how I managed at that age to get to number 56. So I remember in that long list, at least 56 of them. I don't remember what they were. I was very young. Obviously, when on the day when I was confessing, doing the confession, the priest listened to me for like 2 seconds and brushed me aside. That's it, everything forgiven. So this whole build-up came to almost nothing. It was a complete anticlimax. But that was kind of the background. And then I tried to continue to go on my own to church regularly every Sunday. Unfortunately, my attachment kind of weakened to the church, and you really lose interest after a while. There wasn't anything serious to attract you, if you like, to that kind of worship, to the dogma, to the whole setup.
Yeah.
And then I later on befriended somebody who was a Marxist later in my teenage, and he influenced me quite a lot. Gradually, given that I've already lost interest in the Christianity, in God, actually, I became an atheist. Not a Marxist, but an atheist, materialist, if you like. So that kind of lasted for quite some time until at university in my second year. This time I became a close friend with a Muslim. He's a kind of liberal Muslim. And both what I kind of got interested me in particular, his interest in the paranormal. As somebody who was kind of materialistic in his thinking, that was really strange. But then that actually I became serious about those parapsychology and paranormal and that kind of thing. And also, I was interested in the scientific miracles in the Quran, if you like. And suddenly I discovered that there's this book that was actually you can take seriously, as opposed to the literature I'm aware of. In fact, I remember writing a critique of the Gospels at the time. second year at university, I think I was. It wasn't massive, but it was something that, reflected my new perception of the difference between a book like the Quran, which I look at and I couldn't really fault it, at least not, right away, if you like. And books like the Gospels, which I found lacking in so many ways. So that really, gradually, I became a Muslim. It was a process. So I basically became a Muslim in terms of my belief, but I wasn't practicing. Gradually, my first Ramadan, I think, was in 1983. So that I was 22 years old. That was the first time I fasted. And then in 1988, I think we started at the time also reading about Sufis and Sufi lives, and I kind of found them really appealing to me, and to my friend, of course. And then one day we used to visit shrines. There are lots of Shia shrines, Sufi shrines in Iraq, but we went visit one particular Thursday in April 1988. We went to visit the shrine of Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani in Baghdad. He's obviously well-known Sufi. And then the following day was Friday. Then on the Saturday, I think, my friend and I worked in the same place, same organization, but different kind of places, different offices. Somebody came to him and he said, "Oh, I'm a Sufi from so-and-so tariqa Kasnazani, it's called. Why don't you come? It's a tariqa that goes back to Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani. Why don't you come and visit our tekia, like mosque, if you like?" And we went there the following Thursday. So really, as soon as we visited Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, in 2 days, somebody came from nowhere. Wasn't even aware we were there, to invite us to go there. And that's where we took the Baya, Sufi Baya, and started following Sheikh Muhammad al-Kasnazan, his name, who was the Sheikh of Tariqa at the time, Tariqa, called full name Ariya Qadiriya Kasnazaniya or Tariqa Kasnazaniya. And that's where my interest in Sufism started.
MashaAllah, that's so amazing. For those who might not be familiar, so what is Baya? So it's translated maybe as allegiance. What is that process? What did you have to do to become part of that Sufi order?
It's you put your hand, you put your hand in the hand of somebody who's a representative of the Shaykh, and you read the Shahada, the pillars of Islam, that you believe in Allah subhanahu. It's a way of re-expressing, if you like, your Islamic beliefs, but you also express allegiance to the sheikhs of what they call chain of sheikhs, all the way to the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. The point of it is that Bay'ah and Sufism is not simply a handshake. It's a spiritual handshake that connects you spiritually to the sheikh, to the sheikh, to the sheikh. Now, as a practicing Sufi, you should be able to understand along the, on your journey, what that really exactly means. And so it's let's call it a spiritual touch, as my sheikh used to describe it as the spiritual touch. But it's really an expression of Islam, and also it's some kind of a commitment that you're taking so-and-so as your teacher, somebody you're going to learn from. In some way, it's not really that different from other branches of Islamic studies, where you have a teacher and a student, and the student would revisit the teacher every day, all the time, every so-and-so, to learn from them. The difference between the two is that this is more about what we call spiritual learning, if you like. It's more about your character, a variety of things, but really that's ultimately what it is. It's not, you can have a teacher in Sharia, in Tafsir, yes, in Hadith, in all kinds, really. And that is your, let's call them, spiritual teacher.
So true. And I think it's so important to have those teachers in all of those different fields, to have a balanced kind of a learning and education. It reminds me, I was listening to a Sufi from the Caucasus, the Central Asia. I think they were Naqshbandi. and he was laughing a little bit about.
There are no Naqshbandi there, yes.
Yes. And he was kind of joking about people from India and Pakistan, and I can relate to that. He was saying in India and Pakistan, they tend to have one person and that they call as their shaykh. And that one person is responsible for everything, their spirituality, their hadith, their fiqh, which is troublesome in some ways because you need to have that special person of special knowledge for each field, rather than having one person that you're going to rely on everything in life.
There is a very famous, beautiful hadith for the Prophet sallallahu ta'ala alayhi wasallam. It goes something like that: "Ista'inu ala kulli san'atin bi salih ahliha." Seek in every trade, seek the best of the people in that trade, or its experts, if you like. So there is no one person who knows anything and everything. My shaykh, the shaykh that I learned with him Sufism, he himself studied hadith, studied tafsir, studied at the hands of a variety of sheikhs. The other thing is, it's really actually practically impossible, not two things, impossible to have one sheikh, because the sheikh is the teacher at the end of the day. You have to learn from different people, whether you like it or not. Second, it is impossible not to have a sheikh. So there are people who say, oh, Sufis have sheikhs. Well, I'll tell you something. Everybody you read for is your sheikh in some way. Everybody you commit to their teachings, you accept their creed, you accept their teach, you're actually practicing, effectively treating them as your sheikh. And in Islam, if you think of the concept sahabi means companion. Why are they called sahabis? Why we call them the first Muslims, for instance? This is to stress the importance of the concept of company in Islam, the learning by accompanying somebody. You can read about someone and you can read from their writings, you can listen to them. It's very different from you actually accompany them physically, when you see them, when you know more about them. If Sufism is about developing your character, and it is, then you really need that face-to-face. You need that physical learning. You need to sit to them. You see how they behave. What happens with somebody when somebody is angry? How would they react? What would they say if somebody misbehaved? They pick their way. And it's a process of learning all the time. That's not something you can get from books, for instance.
So true. And there's a saying that I've heard of, that he who has no sheikh or no teacher has shaitan as his teacher. So I think absolutely everyone has a teacher, whether you know it or not.
Yeah, man la shaykh lahu fa shaykh shaitan, you're right. Some people say it's hadith. There is no, you can't trace it really to the Prophet alayhi salatu wasalam, but it's well known and accepted. The meaning of it, it's used at times to attack Sufis, but this is about Sufism. What it's saying, you have to learn from others. I mean, I did physics. I did not kind of take books of physics, sat in a room on my own and learned physics. I didn't do that. I had to go to the university to be taught by a number of different lecturers about all kinds of subjects in physics, and so on and so forth. So if somebody would like to learn on their own, they cannot learn. And that's really the kind of dilemma there, and the kind of why you have to have a teacher. And that's ultimately how I understand what it means to say, Man la shaykh lahu shaykh shaitan. Whom are you going to learn from yourself?
Yes, so true. I remember once a brother came to me and told me about a gathering that he goes to, and religious gathering, and he invited me. I went there, and I was just quite surprised. So there was no one who was an actual scholar in the field that they were learning, and what they were doing. They were very sincere people. There was maybe about 30 or 40 of them. And what they were doing is they just had one person download things from Google, read it out, and then talk about their opinion about what was being talked about, and then kind of sharing that. And I was really taken aback. I just kind of never went back to it. And they asked me, why didn't you come back? And I said, I have no disrespect or anything. It's just not for me. religion is something that is very important, obviously, but if we have problems with um, um, in the courts and we need a lawyer, for example, we're not just going to download some books on law and try to have a go ourselves. We're going to try and find the best person we can find for that problem. Similarly, if we have problems with our health, we're going to try and find the best doctor in that field who can help us, who has the best knowledge, the best experience, the best reputation. But when it comes to Islam, we just think it's easy. We'll just download these things ourselves, and it's also we're a sheikh ourselves. So it's very dangerous. And I think especially living in the UK or in non-Muslim countries where it can be hard. It can be hard for people to find a teacher that they can sit down with. It's not easy, but it's doable. And I think we do need to understand the importance of that.
I think what's made it even more difficult and challenging and risky is the time we live in, social media. In the past, in order to get published, you have to go through a process. You have to go a publisher, for instance. A publisher would have editors. Publishers would have reviewers who would kind of assess your content, etc. And they decide to publish, not publish. And then when you buy something or read something that's been published, at least there's some element of guarantee of a quality control, some element. The problem now, we've got to a point where anybody can say anything about anything.
Yeah.
And and that's fine in terms of kind of exercising their rights. I have no problem with that. My problem is with, first of all, if they project an image that's misleading, so they talk as if they are some kind of expert on the subject. Second, the people who are a receipt of this kind of projection, wrong projection of image, and it's very easy for them to go there and see somebody who this many followers, because they have a lot of followers. Surely they know everything, these guys. And then you end up with people kind of learning from the wrong people, the wrong things, etc. So it makes it even more difficult and more critical and necessary for us, every one of us, to check and make sure who are our sources of learning, whether it's a book, whether it's a website, whether it's a human being, etc. We really need to invest a lot more on examining who these sources are, rather than forward, share, and then everybody not only actually being taken in ourselves, but whatever message or whatever person we're looking at, we actually share it and become part of the problem as well.
Talking of like the importance of having a teacher, the importance of having a living teacher it's important for everyone. And then specifically it's important for all Muslims, but especially Sufis pay a lot of importance to that. But then how do we, because I've spoken with some people before about this, and they're saying that they completely appreciate the importance of Sufism, of the Tasawwuf, the importance of having a living teacher that you can learn from. But the teacher that you choose is going to have such huge impact on your life that you're kind of having to give, in some ways, yourself away to that teacher. How do you choose the right teacher? How do you know you've made the right decision? And how, once you've chosen a teacher, how do you balance your own ego, your own maybe knowledge, what you think is right and what they're telling you, that you're not being misled? How do you balance all of that? How do you find the right teacher, first of all?
Yeah, really very good question, because obviously we've just been talking about there are all kinds of false teachers, or let's say not necessarily brilliant teachers. They do not exist only everywhere, but not in Sufism. That would be nonsense, wouldn't it? If they exist everywhere on the internet, in every science, so they exist in Sufism and among Sufis as well. We have to accept that. Yeah. So what that calls for is caution, of course, to start with. The one thing I always say, make sure you do not set your intellect aside, thinking that it's your enemy. The intellect is limited, but it's very powerful. Your starting point is reason, your mind, the thinking process, etc. Yes, you ultimately want to get to something that your mind, your brain cannot get to, the intellect. Spiritual matters, that's what you want, spiritual development. But these are not in conflict. It's very important that we understand where something starts, where something ends, their limits. So I can't prove there is paradise. I have not seen Allah, etc., all of that. But there's a reasoning and there's a thinking process, and there are all kinds of tools and techniques and strategies you can use actually to learn a lot about paradise, about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, about Quran. So, but there are limits. There are limits. There are also the spiritual dimensions of things like a dream, revelation, insights, etc. There are all kinds of things. But these are not in conflict. And what I've seen is that people at times think that when you start to be a Sufi, for instance, you have to actually put your reason aside and then blindly follow. And Sufism is a process where you think all the time. You don't become an idiot when you become a Sufi. You become a thinker. You become somebody. If you were thinking 50%, using 50% of your thinking power, when you become a Sufi, you take it to the maximum, because part of what you do in Sufism is you learn about yourself, self-knowledge, ma'rifat al-nafs, they call it in Arabic. You learn about your environment, you learn about the people you deal with. And also, tafhim, this isn't really about only a Sufi shaykh. It's about the concept of company. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam has a number of hadith about what a bad company can do to you and what good company can do to you. So that company could be, doesn't have to be somebody who's your teacher, religious teacher. It could be a friend. If you befriend somebody, I spoke earlier about how I was affected by friends and influenced by friends. If you go back, I said I befriended a Marxist, and as a result, I became a Marxist. I befriended a Muslim. As a result, I became a Muslim. Now, I did not absorb everything they had, but basically, I'm showing the effect, the influence they had on me. So it's something, being careful with the people, the companies we have, whether religious or not religious, the kind of people we accompany. We have to always use our mind, our brain, our intellect, and keep an eye on ourselves, on people around us. Now, gradually, when you actually accompany somebody who's a genuine, authentic teacher, you will gradually see with your own eyes. You will feel it, you'll experience the genuine nature of that teacher, the authenticity of that teacher. But that's also part of your thinking process, not because you suddenly decided and say, okay, I'm going to accept everything and everything he says. It's not that. It's the fact that your senses, your perception reinforces this message all the time, not because you put your senses and thinking and perception aside.
So Louays, I'm so sorry. We had a bit of technical issues. Before I got cut out, what I was trying to say is that one of the things is that they say, if you're looking for a spiritual teacher, and why you're looking for a spiritual teacher, the best thing you can do is constantly and in abundance send durood and send salutations to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, and that is a big help in bridging that gap that you have between not having a teacher and having a teacher.
Yeah, it's good for every need.
Absolutely. Louay, I'm very interested to know, I've heard in my background from Pakistan, my family's from Pakistan, Iraq and especially Baghdad is such a romantic place for us. There's so many stories, so much history associated with that area. What is the situation in Iraq from a point of view of tasawwuf, spirituality? How common is it? Because what I'm kind of hinting at the moment is, so next door in Syria, we have a kind of like Salafi movement going on, a government. But on the ground level, because I've been to Syria myself, and there's a huge influence of Sufis there as well. What is the situation like for Sufism in Iraq?
And Sufism, there are Sufis, obviously, still a lot of Sufis in Iraq. Not as many as used to be in the past. The Iraq changed dramatically after the toppling of Saddam in 2003. It became basically a sectarian state, failed state, of course, but the Shia influence became immense, and obviously at the same time, as a reaction to the invasion and to the Shia taking over, there was what started as a Sunni resistance, if you like, and developed into Al Qaeda,
Yes.
ISIS later. You basically, when the seeds of division and sectarianism were sown by America, Britain, and all, well, America and its clown states, really, the client states that do some of its dirty business for it. As a result, Iraq changed completely. It's not a healthy environment, actually, generally speaking, Iraq. But of course, people are still there. Sufis are still there, Sunnis, and of course, the majority are Shias. And the interest in Sufism and people seeking Sufism is not going to go away. I mean, at the end of the day, Baghdad is the city that has one of the most sacred shrines, Sufi shrines in Islam, which is the shrine of Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, Qaddasallah Sirrahu al-Aziz, his school in Baghdad, and later he was buried there as well, of course. So, and there are lots. You've got Junaid al-Baghdadi, Ma'ruf al-Karhi, but you basically just name them. A lot of Sufi sheikhs are there, and Iraq and Baghdad in particular will continue to attract Sufis, and Sufism will always be there in Iraq. It just, Iraq itself is not a healthy environment for much, really, right now.
Before we started this interview, you mentioned to me that you've been to Iraq recently, but you had a gap of 27 years. I don't want to go into your personal matters, but is there something you want to share with us? Like what kept you away from Iraq for such a long time?
Oh, and so when we left in 1992, my wife and I, we left secretly, basically. We left Iraq, pretending to be going to Jordan for a short visit.
Oh, wow.
But we had to leave. My wife's father was executed by Saddam, but was a long time ago before we got married. He was accused of being involved in a conspiracy, which was complete nonsense. And then when we got married, we couldn't really, in reality, our marriage was kind of, has kind of politically, potentially dangerous to us. So we had to leave. And when we couldn't go back while Saddam was there, and after Saddam was toppled, there were other kind of personal really circumstances that meant we couldn't go until 2019, and that was 27 years after we left Iraq. And the Iraq we went to had hardly any resemblance to the Iraq we left. It had been destroyed culturally, economically, just on any front really you can think of. And the country we went to was a sad kind of relic of what we left and what used to be Iraq, and still actually very sad condition.
What are your personal thoughts then about what happened? Because that's really interesting to know. So you obviously had a personal reason not to like the Saddam Hussein government that caused you to flee the country before any of these troubles happened, but then seeing what outcome we're facing after the invasion of USA. What are your feelings about what's happened and what the community has gone through? Because I think so many other countries are going through similar turbulence, revolts against governments, unrest. How do you cope with that, and how do you still stay grounded and have hope for the future?
Yeah, so Saddam was a dictator and was very brutal dictator. But Saddam was much better to Iraq than the many dictators that came after him under the name of democracy. America and its client states, Britain, etc., never had the real interest of the Iraqis at heart. It's all part of an ongoing it's continuation of this colonization, if not military at times, it's continuously cultural colonization and control of resources, interest in oil, etc., all of that. So that really, and that was going ultimately to lead to a worse state than what they claimed they wanted to change. They used militia, Shia militia. They created sectarianism in Iraq. I mentioned earlier I came from a Christian family. Until my teens or whatever, until I went to university, until I became Muslim, you didn't really need to worry that you're Christian living in a Muslim country.
Yeah.
Of course, there's an element, little bit of tension at times between Sunnis, Shias, etc., or he's a Christian. In terms of you do things differently, if you like. But you didn't need to worry about yourself. Nobody was going to stop you on the street and ask you, is your name Umar or Ali, and decide whether to kill you or let you continue it. That's what we ended up with. But the sectarianism in Iraq was not random, was not spontaneous. It was utterly and completely designed by the very scheme that America and its allies used to control Iraq. The message was, well, let's bring in Shia, because Shias were persecuted by Saddam. Well, I'll tell you something. Saddam persecuted anybody he didn't like, or he felt that he was a threat to him. Seriously.
Yeah.
So, I mean, my father-in-law was a Sunni. He wasn't actually a Shia. And Saddam killed a lot of Sunnis. So what happened is Iraq has become a failed state. And the problem is it's now surrounded by effectively failed states as well.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know where Syria is going to go. Yeah. I hope it's not going to go down the route Iraq went. I heard about sectarianism, etc., that started taking place in Syria as well. Alawis killing Sunnis, Sunnis killing Alawis, etc. And then you've got Iran from the other side. And effectively, Iraq became a kind of a city, a secondary city in Iran. Iran is complete control of Iraq. Again, I wouldn't blame Iran as much as I would blame the people, the countries, the powers, the international powers that allowed Iran to become in this position.
It's so true. If it is mind-boggling in some ways what the USA has done, because if they think their main threat in the region is Iran, and then they dismantle this government and present the state as a gift to Iran, it just makes no sense what they're doing. But maybe it makes a lot of sense when we just see chaos and destruction being caused everywhere. Going back to tasawwuf, I just wanted to get your thoughts as well, because a lot of people who maybe listen to these things and not have a lot of information about actually what tasawwuf and what Sufism is, sometimes they think Sufis are like a sect within Islam, which isn't the case, because it's not like Shia, Sunni, or Brelvi, Deobandi we have in the subcontinent. It's a spiritual dimension that kind of crosses all of these different sects. Can you kind of explain a little bit about what the basic, what Sufism is?
Yes. So if you go back to the earliest sources, and you read about Sufism, Sufism is about developing your character as a Muslim. Sufism about taking, rather than accepting the minimum standards, it's about seeking the highest standards possible. So if you read about the life of any Sufi shaykh, that's exactly what you see. They are after better and better and better. They're trying to better themselves all the time, spiritually. There is nothing to Sufism, really. The essence of this of Sufism is that if you go back to let's say, the earliest book on Sufism, it's called Al-Luma' fi Tasawwuf, the luminaries in Sufism. It's by somebody called Abu Nasr al-Tusi. This was the kind of oldest compilation of kind of sayings by Sufis about Sufis, etc. It was written, the author died in 378, so in the 4th century Hijrah. And if you read about Sufism there, and this is the oldest book, or you pick a book that was written about 50 years after that, called the Risala al-Qushayriya, the epistle, the Qushayri epistle by Abu Qasim al-Qushayri, very famous as well. Again, if you read those books, all you find is talk about how you manage or discipline yourself to control your desires, your base aspirations, to become better, to become more patient. I mean, the subject matters in those books, the chapters are actually named about virtues. So you'll have something like patience, thankfulness, mercy, oneness of Allah. So you'll have a chapter like that, and then Sufis would be mentioned. So-and-so said so-and-so, so-and-so said so-and-so. That's really the essence of Sufism. This is why even Ibn Taymiyyah, the Salaf, is these days run at Ibn Taymiyyah to try and discredit Sufis. No, Ibn Taymiyyah actually wrote in the praise of Sufism at length in his Fatawa, which is a volume 37 volume work, massive. Volume number 10, called, it talks about suluk or behavior, and he uses actually Sufi terms like hal, maqam, station or state, and that kind of thing. Volume 11 is completely about Sufis. And yes, he criticizes a lot of Sufi practices, Sufi thinking, and he uses really harsh and unnecessarily extreme language. But at the same time, he praises a lot of those Sufis. He was a big admirer of Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani, for instance. He actually wrote a commentary on one of his books. He quoted him or some of his miracles, Karama we call it, supernatural things, etc. So Sufism, in essence, is good. It's good, but I don't want to say there are no bad Sufis. I mentioned this earlier, because when Abu Qasim al-Qushayri wrote his letter in the year 437 about Sufism, at the time, he said, I'm writing this book because there are a lot of people who now claim to be Sufis, but they are not Sufis at the time. But that's the nature of any thought, any school of thought. Even Muslims forget about Sufis under the name of Islam. All kinds of crimes, terrorism, all kinds of atrocities, all kinds of wrong teachings were committed and propagated under the name of Islam. It's nothing to do with Sufism, nor even with religion. Or just look everywhere. The one concept, the concept that has been abused more than anything else in modern times and caused the largest number of atrocities in the world, is democracy. It's not Islam.
Yes.
It's not Christianity even. It's not nothing, none of it. It's democracy, actually. Whole countries, whole regions were destroyed under the pretext or spreading democracy. Now, that doesn't mean that democracy itself is bad.
Exactly.
It's just being abused.
Yes. I love reading classical text when it comes to religion. And one of the books that I was reading is called Kashful Majub by Ali Ajwari, that Ganj Bakhsh in buried in Lahore now. I think it's one of the oldest.
Sorry, I lost you.
You left me. Can you hear me now?
The last.
A book called Kashful Majub.
I can now.
I don't know if you're familiar. There's a book called Kashful
Yes.
Majub
Ajwari.
by Ali Ajwari, who is known as Data Ganj Bakhsh, is buried in Lahore in Pakistan. His treaty is, I think, one of the oldest treaty in Persian language on Islam, on Sufism. And even then, he's exactly talking about like false kind of Sufis or people who are not practicing things properly. So we should never take our religion or any of these teachings for granted, and we should always be careful to weigh out the right and the wrongs. But I just feel that Islam without Sufism it can distract us. It can lead us into very dark places where we have takfiri Muslims, people who find fault in everyone else apart from themselves. Whereas the thing I like the best about Sufism is it's all about self-reflection. It's trying to improve yourself, criticize yourself, not criticize others. Always find good in others, and always try and improve yourself. See what you're doing, why you're doing what you're doing, why are you not doing what you're not doing, and always try and reflect, to have self-reflection, which I think is so important in society, just to be a better human being, really. Louay, you've written a book called Tawheed in Sufis, or in Sufism. What was the need to write that book? And does that imply that Sufis have a problem with Tawheed? And can you explain a little bit about what Tawheed actually is?
Okay, so at any point in time, I have a number of projects I'm working on. These are personal interests. This book wasn't actually something I wanted to write. I never thought about, I know obviously about the issues with Tawheed and accusations against Sufis, some Sufis of not being muwahid. But that's not the reason I wrote the book. It was actually, I saw the title in a dream late in 2021, December. And one day around dawn time, I saw the name in Arabic, Tawheed and Sufiya, which means, Tawheed or oneness of God, according to Sufism, to Sufis. And I understood that this is a book that had not been written, and that, and also I understood there and then that it would consist or contain sayings by Sufis about Tawheed, about the concept of Tawheed. And obviously it's clear that it's a defense of Sufism, reinforcing the fact that Sufis, of course, very muwahid, like anybody, like every Muslim, etc. So it wasn't actually a book that I was thinking of writing. And then when I woke up in the morning, I went actually check. I did a search online, because my understanding there's no such book, and it sounded counterintuitive. I mean, you would think surely somebody must have written a book on this, like what sounds like really a logical subject to write about, and I couldn't find any, which confirmed what I saw in the dream. So, but because it wasn't actually something I was planning to write, I just left it on a slow burner, so kind of in the background, adding material every now and then. And then I decided that as I was commenting on the sayings that I was translating, etc., I realized that actually I better off add another 2 chapters at the beginning, one of them about Tawheed, about Sufism, and the other about Tawheed, including Tawheed in Sufism. So I can tackle a variety of issues rather than have to raise them every time I come across a particular comment or saying. So that really was the background to this book. And the first 2 chapters even though I made them quite concise, I don't want really to add a lot there, but I covered what I consider to be critical points about the misunderstanding that a lot of Muslims have about Tawheed, about the concept of Iman, faith, the concept of even Aqidah, creed, and the confusion that has led a lot of people to accuse each other of takfir, of kufr, accusing each other of kufr because really of issues they don't really fully understand about the difference between the basics of faith, ijtihad, logical kind of personal thinking, as in when you try like tafsir, interpretation, etc. So that's the background, Tafhim, of this particular book. It wasn't an idea that I thought, oh, I would like to write a book on it.
Louis, it's very interesting, the discussion we've had so far, but one thing I'm dying to ask you is your interest about the paranormal, because I've always been interested in that. And I've had some episodes relating to some of those things. So tell me, what is your interest in the paranormal? Or do you still have that interest, or was that something that you had at the time?
Yeah, so obviously paranormal, you say paranormal, and most people will say, right, okay, I would like to, people would be interested, and a lot of people would dismiss the concept. I was interested in the concept, and I studied it in a more kind of scientific way, if you like, in the sense that I studied research done under the name of parapsychology, and that's done really in labs by traditional scholars, etc., all kinds. And I continued to be interested in those phenomena. I wrote quite a few books that specifically about those or touch on them. But my interest in the paranormal really developed and moved on from being purely about the paranormal to be more interested in what I call, or what we call, the concept of karama.
Yes.
Karama is let's call it the paranormal feat by somebody who's close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or somebody who's not a prophet. Prophet usually in Islam use a word called mu'jiza, miracle. Yeah. So Muslim scholars are very careful to distinguish between the two to avoid any misunderstanding. So it moved on. And as I became more and more interested in Sufism, part of my interest is Karama, because Karama is part of the heritage in Sufism, part of the history actually of the shaykh of Sufism. If you read about the life of Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, for instance, you can't just ignore what's been said about him, what people show, and I say including Ibn Taymiyyah, believe it or not. Nobody, we're not talking about somebody that nobody knows. No, Ibn Taymiyyah himself. In fact, Ibn Taymiyyah recounted one karama that happened during the life of Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, and one of the karamas after the death of Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani, in which somebody saw Shaykh Abdul Qadir Jilani after his death. So what Ibn Taymiyyah is saying, that karamas of those people can continue even after they're gone. So that kind of and we can't read. I wrote a biography of my shaykh, and I couldn't ignore the fact that karamas played a big role in his life, as I usually put it, trying to translate it into. So I call karamas the ink with which the life of a shaykh is written. Those karamas, those paranormal feats, whatever, not because they go out of their way to do them, they're just natural. Why they're natural? Because if you're close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that's what you should expect happen. If you read in the early history of Islam, if you read some of the Sahabas and you read about what happened to them, well, how did this happen? It's not they sought these kind of things. In fact, my shaykh used to say, when it comes to karama, as all sheikhs used to say, the person, if you experience something, you must hide it, conceal it. It's something to learn from, maybe to strengthen your faith, maybe to kind of disclose something to you in a very unusual way, spiritual way. but it's not something you should share with others. It's for your own. He used to say, a karama in the hand of the person should be like an old woman, very poor old woman. So she's powerless and she's poor, and she has a coin. Because she has a coin and she's keen, nobody will steal it from her because she's powerless and she doesn't have much. She would grab it like that and hide it, so but nobody knows there's a coin actually in her hand. That's how you should protect a karama. But it's part of the learning and part of the experience of being a Muslim. Really, karama is not as some people would kind of make it a Sufi thing. It's not a Sufi thing. If you consider seeking closeness to Allah a Muslim thing, well, karama will be a Muslim thing then. It's not a Sufi thing.
Yes.
But because Sufis dedicated so much of their lives to be close to Allah, worshipped so much, and worked on refining their moral character so much, that's why they became a concentration place. Their surrounding, not only what happens to them, surrounding people connected with them, they saw a lot, heard a lot, witnessed a lot, in dream or in wakefulness, just by virtue of being close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Absolutely. I see in a lot of other religions, whether it's Hinduism, Christianity, it does sometimes become like a show where if someone, they think they have some spiritual powers or something, then they make a big fuss about it, and they try and tell as many people as possible. But absolutely, in Islam, in Sufism especially, it is something that comes naturally as you progress through the stages, and it's something that people actually try and go out of their way to conceal rather than to brag about. It's a bit like light emitting from someone or something that just cannot be hidden, but it's not something that you, in some ways, even have any control over. It is what it is. Can you give me some examples of what we're talking about?
It could be anything. It could be somebody who's seriously ill, and he may see a dream one day. In that dream, he may see a shaykh or his or her shaykh, and that shaykh would heal them in the dream. They wake up in the morning and they're actually completely healed. It could be something that happens in a wakeful state. So I've seen a lot of people myself who would come to the shaykh seeking help with something. He might give them at times just water, just normal water. It happened to be water at times, maybe the place all is blessed, and that water becomes healing water for them. I actually wrote a book. I documented very short book, karamas that happened in India to one of a preacher, we call him Khalifa or representative of the Sheikh, that was sent by the Sheikh to teach Sufism in India. And he witnessed a lot of things happen to him and to people there. And I actually documented quite a lot of them, published them in Arabic and English. These include episodes of healing. They include all kinds of dreams, strange dreams, at times information that nobody should actually be aware of, but they would be told, go and find X, Y, Z, that kind of, and some of them are really, really sophisticated, as in involving multiple people, multiple places over a long period of time. And when you look at these kind of stories, you can't fail to conclude whatever power is behind that must be divine power ultimately, as in supported by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because no human being, no creature would have that kind of power.
Yeah.
And you mentioned something also I think is important, which is the fact that when we say karama, we really mean a supernatural act by a good person, by a good Muslim, a good Sufi. But paranormal or these kind of supernatural powers do not exist only in Islam.
Yes.
They exist in other religions and actually other people who aren't even religious, because in Islam we know there's something called the spirit world. So we are only we're not the only people in this universe. And in Islam, actually, there's something called karama, and there's something called istidraj. Istidraj is when a person kind of is given or develops those kind of really strange supernatural abilities, but completely in disconnect with their moral, spiritual state. So they could be completely immoral, irreligious. They could be anything, but happen to be able to do what is effectively supernatural. Because, like I say, we know that from the Quran, no less, that the world in which we live is more complex, and there is more that we cannot see than what we see. And as a result, we shouldn't be surprised if we see actually, some supernatural things happening in all kinds of places to all kinds of people. The difference, though, is that the karamas we're talking about, first of all, are associated with people of the highest moral and spiritual standards. They are not used they're not kind of for showing off.
Yes.
They're not used to seek any benefits. They're none of this. Most of them happen naturally, not even as a result of some kind of a process, or just natural.
Well, I'll say that sometimes the average Muslim, average person, really the average human being, can experience some of these things personally, where something called marfa, where we have foresight or insight, where we can sometimes we have experiences that we just cannot explain rationally in any way. We might sometimes see in dreams or in other ways what's about to happen, and things happen, or different experiences we can have. But as a Sufi, as a Muslim, when that happens, we have to be very careful. We should never be proud or boast about these things, and we should always be very humble and very fearful, because as Louay explained, sometimes these things are coming from Allah Ta'ala, from God. As we get closer to God, as we do good things, then good things happen to us. Sometimes these things can be a means for misguidance for people who are arrogant. So we should always be very humble and always attribute everything to God, to Allah Ta'ala, and not to ourselves. Because these things can be very dangerous, but they're very real as well. Louay, what do you think about this?
Yeah, I completely agree. I think in terms of being humble and having humility and not to have any arrogance is really a broad advice that applies to every aspect of our behavior, our thinking. It doesn't matter. This is only about whether you experience any kind of supernatural thing or not. A lot of people don't have or don't experience or not aware of anything unusual happening to them, but they're still arrogant about all kinds of things in their lives. You find people who probably we think they should be ashamed of themselves, but you find them actually very proud of themselves. I mean, how about Trump, for an example? So arrogance, as I like to call it, is the oldest spiritual disease, because the first person, calling person to display that was Satan, Shaitan, Iblis. So, and that is actually satanic disease, if you like, this particular spiritual disease, having arrogance. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran criticizes repeatedly those who have what is called in Arabic kibr, pride, arrogance. And the Muslim, any Muslim, should always try and make sure that they are they don't feel proud of their status, their prayer, their behavior, their anything and everything. And indeed, one of the things that Muslims are always reminded that if you do anything good, if you give to charity, keep it secret. Yeah. Don't share it and make it. Why is that? Because there's a possibility that if you give to charity and somebody was aware of it, or you told people about them, they will say, oh, well done, Tafhim. Well, that's brilliant. And that ultimately could reflect on you and make you feel kind of proud of yourself. And somehow, because these are subtleties. My shaykh used to say that tariqah or Sufism is really very sensitive. He keeps on saying that. Very sensitive to the slightest of things. That's what Sufis used to do, always monitoring their behaviors, their motives. Why are they doing something? Why are they not doing something else? Trying to always keep an eye on themselves. That is actually what's known as ma'rifat al-nafs, self-knowledge, self-awareness. It's very big in Sufism. And Sufis are really, really, nobody practices self-knowledge as Sufis do.
I'm reminded of a story I heard that once Abu Bakr, may peace, Allah be pleased with him, who was the first Khalifa in Islam, was one day sitting by himself, and someone came and saw him just sitting quietly and actually getting his tongue out of his mouth and holding onto his tongue. And they asked what he was doing, and he said that I'm trying to take account for this thing that could lead me to paradise or to hell. And that is basically amazing, but that is kind of self-reflection that we need to be doing. And that is the kind of things that Sufism teaches us, to constantly monitor ourselves, take account for ourselves before we are taken account of.
The picture you just described reminds me actually personally from one of the earliest things I learned from my shaykh in 1988 or something, late in the 80s. One of the images that stayed in my mind, he used to point at his tongue and he used to say, be aware of this. Be aware of this. Once a word is out, you can't take it back. Okay. And the point here, what Abu Bakr was saying, is that you could cause a lot of damage. And as we all know, destruction can happen in a second. Constructing takes months, construction years, but you can have everything destroyed. At times, just the wrong word can damage a long-term relationship. A relationship you spend a lot developing, caring for, a lot of things can just get completely lost by, the wrong moment, the wrong kind of word. So yeah, absolutely right. Absolutely right.
Yes. So may Allah guide us all and grant us humility, humbleness in front of Him, and safeguard us from pride, which is our biggest enemy, really. Louay, one other thing I wanted to ask you is, I know personally of some people, well, I don't know if I should say this or not, but what do you think about, so apparently there are some people who can communicate with the dead. And I have never even talked about this previously until I heard, I don't know if you know about Dahil Qadri. He's a very big scholar. He was based in the UK. He's now living in Canada. And I heard him tell a story. It was in Urdu. I'll maybe paraphrase it in English. But he explained, so he said that he went to Turkey once. He used to go to Turkey a lot. He probably still does. But there was one city that he always wanted to go to, but he never had a chance. And there was a Zawiya Taqiya there that he wanted to visit. It so happened that he was about to get a plane from Istanbul back to Canada or something, or Pakistan, I can't remember. His flight got cancelled at the very last minute. And the next flight was in 6 or 8 hours or something. So he had a lot of time to kill and he didn't know what to do. So he thought, okay, that's it. I'm going to go to this city that I always wanted to go to. He was alone. He didn't tell anyone. He went there. It was like nighttime. It was like 10 p.m., 11 p.m., something like that. It was dark. He got to the place where he wanted to go to. There was a woman standing outside. She was waiting for him. She said that I've been waiting for you for some time. I've been told that you were coming. And he said, told by who? And she didn't say anything. They said, everyone's waiting for you. He went to that building and it was basically a spiritual gathering of some sort. Can you explain, can you talk to us a little bit about things that can happen like this to people, to spiritual people, to people who are of a higher level, maybe?
Sorry, I missed the name of the person. You mentioned the names of the person.
The name is Tahir Al-Qadri.
Oh, yeah. Qadri had a scholar.
Yes, he's a private scholar. He had a presence in East London. He's based in Canada himself right now.
Yeah, I forgot he has an organization actually.
Yes, is that name? It's called Minhaj Al-Quran.
Minhaj Al-Quran, yes. Yeah. Minhaj Al-Quran, yeah. And I've been actually, I've been to their center in London, but that was in 2000 or something like that.
Oh, really?
There was a conference there. Okay, so I can't comment obviously of any one particular event. I don't know much about it, but I think in a principle, I don't see I can't say impossible to something. I can't really say so-and-so cannot happen for a very simple reason. The spirit world is a complex one. And the nature of the karamas that I am aware of, studied whether these are things happened in the past, and I read about them, or things that happen in modern times, I'm aware of them. And I've interviewed, asked, etc., people who they cover just about a wide spectrum. They fall on everything and about anything. So I personally, if you ask, I can't make a blanket statement and say, so-and-so cannot happen.
Yes.
It's not really, I don't feel that this is realistic or logical. But the question you asked is specifically about spirits of dead people, I think you said. Dead people. There are no question people who claim to communicate with the spirits of dead people. Whether they are communicating with are actually the spirits of those dead people or not is a different story.
That's true.
But it's well known even in, they used to call them, I think, spiritist, I think, or spiritualist in Europe. They would conduct seances, they call them, and try to call on the spirit of dead people usually. And those spirits would come, say things, share information apparently that's not known other than to the whoever attending it or the dead person, that kind of thing. Whether those entities, the spirits, whatever, are actually of that particular dead person or not, I don't know. I can't tell. But I know these things happen in this kind of setup. In this setup. What I would say, though, which is what I'm more interested in, when it comes to people who are very close to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, sheikhs who died, I know that spiritually they can still be there. They can communicate. They can appear to people. They can help people. They can inform people about things. And like an example I mentioned, even Ibn Taymiyyah, what's interesting about that example, Karama by Ibn Taymiyyah, he quoted someone And he said, my father heard it from him, but actually I might have heard it from him directly. And the karama was about this person seeing Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani in a dream, in a sleep. And Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani told him that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says and something. So it's kind of equivalent of words as if from Allah, some teaching, if you like. That's the context kind of the broad description of the karama itself. And that's being transmitted by Ibn Taymiyyah actually himself, no less. So when it comes to spirits of sheikhs, people who have attained that level of closeness to Allah, these are different. I talk about them as they are the spirits. They are the spirits of Sheikh Abdul Qadir Jilani. There's the spirit of Sheikh Muhammad al-Kasnani, Sheikh Abu al-Hasan al-Shadhili, or, numerous people. I can confidently say, yes, that's the spirit of that particular person. When you talk about other normal person, you and I don't know what communication, what nature of kind of spirit, if you like, in attendance. That's difficult to tell, but they exist. The setup you described absolutely exists.
Thank you. Yes, that's what I was referring to. Spirits of Awliyaullah, Waliullahs, saints who have passed away, and they still have an influence on us. So it's very interesting. It's a whole big area to study and to understand. Louay, thank you so
Inshallah. And thank you very much, Tafin. Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you. Before we go, please. Hey there. I hope you're enjoying this episode. Let me just take a moment to introduce our sponsors for today. This episode is kindly being sponsored by the Worldwide Listings Company Limited, or WLC for short. WLC is a complete A to Z Amazon account management service. So if you're looking to start an e-commerce business, or you already have a business that you want to take to the next level, then get in touch and WLC will be able to help. Just for transparency purposes, let me also mention that WLC is a company that I personally created and am a director of. So when you get in touch with WLC, you will be speaking with directly myself or my team, and we very much look forward to speaking with you to see how we can serve your needs. Thank you. And with that said, let's get back to the episode.